Hey, everybody, welcome. It's another episode of Tell Me Your Story here on the Testimony House Network. So thankful you've joined us on the program today. We have a special guest coming up in just a few moments, but before then I just want to let everybody know that this show is to encourage you in your walk and to find what God has for your life. We want to be able to encourage you with the stories of people who are walking with God and for God, share the stories of how they've been spoken to by God and allowed to sort of walk out in a path that can be interesting and faith-filled. And so we want to be able to share those stories with you today. A wonderful guest we have on the program today, Jerry E. Thompson. He is the writer-director of a film that came out just a couple years ago called Translated. I think we have an image of that somewhere we can put on the screen for you guys. This is the story of Paul as he was brought to modern America, and we're very excited to talk to the man who came up with this story idea and then filmed it over in Oregon. We're thankful to talk to him today. Jerry, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, John. I'm honored to be here. Testimonies are the lifeblood of Christianity.
Yes, and we're thankful to be able to hear yours today in some form or fashion. So, what I'd really like to start with, because I'm so interested in how a Christian becomes a filmmaker, and how we walk down this path, but at some point, you became a Christian and God called you into this path in life. So, can you sort of walk us through that journey that you went on?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is about the last thing I ever was planning on doing. I had no plans on being a filmmaker or a Christian. Grew up in a family that was a wonderful, loving family, but didn't ever go to church, didn't talk about the Lord. Um, Almost fatal accidents where we almost all could have been killed, but were not killed when I was 12 years old, set me on a path to look for what could happen after you die. Vietnam era was when I came to the Lord at the University of Oregon, and I was going to be a coach, and decided to go actually to Eugene Bible College 2 years after Oregon, and became a yearbook editor. Which, how does that translate into film? Well, I learned photography, and this is something I never planned on doing at all, and starting with nothing and creating something. So that was the start of it. I watched the 700 Club, loved watching the 700 Club and their testimonies, just like we're doing now, somewhat, and heard about their graduate school because I had a BA in pastoral studies, but thought maybe I'd be a teacher, not a pastor. But heard about this exciting new university, CBN University. It's now Regent University, started by Pat Robertson. So went all the way, my wife and I went all the way from Oregon to Virginia Beach with just a little or nothing. And it was just a great time there. Got a master's degree. Thought I was going to go into radio to start with. Instead, took the film and television classes and got hooked on that. And then when I graduated, our son was born. I have a daughter 2 years later after that. Anyway, hi, Heather, if you're listening. But anyway, got a job with a film company in Medford, Oregon. It's a fairly small town, 50,000 or so. I'm from Cottage Grove, small town, but went to the University of Oregon, Eugene, about 150,000. And there was an American Indian film that had just been made. Now, I wasn't involved in the production, but they hired me as a publicity person. So that the film got more in my blood there. I got to talk to a lot of Native American tribes around the country and was working for that company, and then decided, along with a graduate from CBN, to start our own film company in Eugene. We made an evolution creation film, which was basically science oriented, not biblical oriented, but it helped reveal some truths and was good, well received. Then 3 years later, I wrote a script for a movie with actors and actresses for the first time and directed it, called God on Trial. And that's kind of, having grown up atheist, agnostic, it's kind of dear to my heart. That sounds weird to be that dear to my heart, but to reach people who have questions and who, like in God on Trial, about 65-minute movie for the church market at the time, back in 1985. You want to reach people who have questions about God. Why would a loving God allow all this suffering? That was one of the main themes had a surprise ending, and got some good reviews on that. However, like in a lot of people in Christian films, it didn't make enough money to support the family, so it did a lot of different things. I did make a history of Oregon football video, which the whole history of their football program, because I'm a University of Oregon Duck fan. That's kind of a digression from Christian films, but after that, worked some other jobs, did some real estate. And it wasn't until 2016 that the idea of translated, the Apostle Paul coming to our time, that's the nutshell of the movie, because I went to a four-star church for 40 years, but I've been to every kind of church, Baptist, Catholic, Presbyterian, and attended Assembly of God, you name it, Seventh-day Adventist. I've been to all of them. And it just seemed like what was going on is very sincere people trying to build their little kingdom, but not ever getting together, hardly ever getting together, and knowing, for example, Eugene, Oregon, now closer to 200,000 people, what the body of Christ is doing together and what the Lord is doing, not just in their denomination, but the living God, he's doing things in every congregation. But you'd think in a city that size, there'd be a way to communicate that and share that with people. And the heart, what I felt was the message of Jesus's heart and the Apostle Paul, if he did come here, but Jesus, who's living now, of course, Paul in a different capacity, was out of John 17, 20, 21. Jesus talking to Peter and John and Andrew and his other disciples right before his arrest, said he prayed to the Father that they would all be one, and then those who believe because of them. And we, John and you and I and everybody else listening who are Christians, believe because of what John and Peter and Andrew and all the others did and gave up their lives for the Lord. And he said that when we are one, then the world will know that the Father sent me. And I'd been in Bible college, I'd read that verse, been to church hundreds and thousands of times, literally. And it just struck me that that's almost like evangelism, is
Yeah.
when the world sees that you are one, then they will know that Jesus is real. So that's kind of the basis of Translated. Wrote it in about 6 months in 2016, shot it in 3 or 4 months in summer of 17, released it to a theater in Eugene in 18. We did have nationwide clearance from Regal Theaters, so we had a bona fide, it wasn't just because of here in Eugene, but we did kind of a test market there. It did well. I mean, there's no guarantee of more than 1 week, and we beat every film but Crazy Rich Asians. We beat Mission Impossible, Alpha, Christopher Robinson, other films. But we thought we would get a bump from actually CBN to promote it. Didn't happen. So we didn't have the money to promote it and get it in 1,000 theaters. So now I'm here letting people know about Slated, and we're using various means of letting people know. But there's a lot of other messages I hope that you saw in the movie besides the unity message.
Yeah, I really appreciated the film, and I wanted, before we talk a little bit about Translated, I wanted to go back to something you just mentioned about God on Trial, because as you were talking about that movie that you put out years ago, it reminded me so much of the premise of God's Not Dead, which came out years later and had that massive success. The idea of, questioning God and putting God on trial and having thoughts about God, and what a interesting premise. And God's using you to sort of share these premises with people. And so this Translated film you had mentioned was Paul being transported into today's timeline and what that looks like. And the premise being he's trying to pull the churches together and bring unity. Obviously, you said there's more things in it than that. And I really want to talk to you about the making of that film, though, and what it was that gave you the idea to write that to pen to paper and then put it on film.
Again, it was just seeing churches and how it seemed like everyone I went to, whether it was Assembly of God, Calvary Chapel, you name it, Foursquare, all well-meaning, sincere people, but I don't know what's going on they're not meeting together. It just seemed kind of strange for a family in a city to not meet together at least once or twice a year. I know Seventh Day Adventists and the Baptists and these people are never going to form one denomination. That's not the point. That would be unrealistic. It'd be nice, but it's unrealistic. But actually, to be sharing with one another and not worrying about money or how many people you're going to get in your congregation, and hearing the testimonies of people in our city, and you start. We had a event where we shot part of the movie at the event, but we also had people giving their testimonies. It wasn't part of the movie translated, but it drew the audience for that scene. And, there's so many great testimonies people never heard of in their own city. One scene in the movie you probably remember is driving down one street in Eugene, it's 18th Street, and we've seen about 15 churches, and the Apostle Paul asking his friend Tim, who picked him up. Tim was a truck driver. Paul was homeless because he didn't know what was going on, being translated from Rome, Italy to Oregon. Paul asked Tim, when do they all meet? And he says, well, the sad thing is they hardly ever do. I think that's important. That was one of the main messages and with the things that are going on in our world now, I think being a Christian is not as going to be as easy necessarily as it has been, at least in America.
Yeah. The reviews for Translated, there are many. You sent some over, and I wanted to share them with our audience because, I mean, it's a unique film. Anybody who's into watching wholesome family videos, in fact, when I watched this over the weekend with my family, my 4-year-old daughter was just, she kept calling him Noman. She heard Roman in one of the first scenes that he was called a Roman, and she kept calling Paul Noman after that. The rest of the show, she said, "What's happening to Noman?" She kept saying, but she really enjoyed the film. Richard Evans, a New York Times best-selling author, said Translated is a unique and refreshing movie that's well worth the watch, entertaining and inspired. Another, Dr. Wayne Cordero from New Hope Christian College, called it a well-filmed with a critical message for churches today. This is a good stuff, and I love being able to watch shows like this with my family because today's media, if you watch just even the big three or the big five or the big four, whatever you want to call them, they don't have a lot of stuff aimed at my demographic, which is a Christian family who's looking for wholesome things to watch. And so what you've produced is that. It's got the theme of God and it's got the theme of Christ in it. And I just want to be able to talk to you about what your journey has been to be able to share productions like that in addition to Translated.
Well, my journey has been, I kind of told you about that from evolution creation to God on trial to Oregon sports to the other thing about the movie, I'm going to get back to what you're asking, is a lot of people say it's out of the box. It's not your typical Christian movie. And we had a professor, the head of the graduate school at CBN, say that it was one of the best Christian films he's ever seen because he felt like it was reality. It wasn't cliche. And so, this isn't, it's a family film because there's not cussing and other things, but it is, I would say it's directed more towards high school and over. But I'm pleased to hear that your daughter liked it. Filmmaking itself it was fun. I mean, it was fun writing something. And you mentioned the author Richard Paul Evans, very established, 38 bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers. Went on a cruise where he was the featured person, and he said, I was really surprised to find out that when he started writing the book, he didn't know where it was going to go. And with the Apostle Paul, I kind of knew generally where it was going to go, but it was so fun writing and making up these characters, and then the dialogue and all the events that can happen. It was pretty amazing. There's one I don't want to give away too much about the movie, but there's a testimony in the movie itself, since this is Testimony House,
yes,
that it was excuse me, it's easy to say, autobiographical. It happened to me when I was in Bible college. And this is probably one of the most meaningful things that's ever happened in my life, if you don't mind me sharing that.
Absolutely, go ahead.
The true part is I was at Eugene Bible College, And I was wondering, how in the world can I keep the first commandment? To love God with all your heart, mind, body, soul, and strength. I mean, that's sold out. That's really something to be able to do that. And I was just trying to be honest before God. I don't really feel that way. Am I lukewarm? I don't know, but I don't feel that sold out with everything in my being, loving God. And the kind of funny that's a commandment, you know. So I went into the break room and meditated on God is love, and love is 1 Corinthians 13. Love does not seek its own, is patient, is kind, not jealous, all these things. And I was thinking, meditating in the break room by myself, it began to occur to me what I already knew mentally, but that God was a father. He was like a father. And God was love. He did not seek his own. He's not even selfish. And all these things. And just like in the movie where we recreate that, it just came upon me that he's my father. I thought about my dad that I grew up with. I called him daddy. And then I thought, God is my daddy. And, that's Abba fathers in Romans and Galatians, I think, with the Apostle Paul. But it was a unique experience that's for the next 5 minutes after that. It was about a 15 minutes experience where I would say Holy Spirit really got a hold of me. And I was meditating, and the only thing on my mind as I was getting up and go out of the break room was, I love my daddy. God is my daddy, and I love my daddy. Just like I love my earthly father, but even in a bigger dimension, a different dimension. So as I walked out of the department store break room, the first thing I saw, and it's never happened in my life before or since, was a young father with a 2-year-old or so in a stroller with written on him in words, I love daddy, or I love my daddy. We put that in the film, and there's been people who, the satisfying thing is when you write a film, you don't know how they're going to react. People cried. And then, of course, they laughed at certain parts where it was supposed to be funny. It's very satisfying to write something. People actually laugh. But this one thing I felt like heaven came down and became real right in front of my eyes. And that's the answer. How can I love God with all my heart, mind, body, soul, and strength? Because he's my daddy. And you have to think of him that way. And I think I know the enemy is always trying to make God look like a Scrooge and someone who does not want to provide the abundant life. He wants to steal, rob, and destroy. And that was an answer to prayer. That was, to me, one of the most meaningful events of my life.
Yeah, that's an incredible testimony. In fact, it was featured in part as inside the film translated, a powerful scene with the actor there. And I'm so thankful that you've been able to share your heart with what this film is about. I love the scene that you just mentioned, but I also love some of the pushback that you highlighted, that when Paul showed up to share this message of unity, it wasn't just everybody was behind this. And you talked about that a little bit.
Right, I made up a character, but I want to let people know there's a lot of humor in this, because you've got an fish situation where the Apostle Paul is in Rome, and it's meant to be humorous, but it's real. He's actually transferred to Rome, Oregon. I grew up in Oregon all my life and didn't even know there was a Rome, Oregon. I thought I was going to send to Damascus near Portland, and I went up there and it looked like just too big a hassle to make this happen. I went home and Googled Rome, Oregon, hoping there would be one, and there was, and it turned out to be perfect for filming this. So Paul now finds himself, doesn't know what in the world happened. He's about to be beheaded, and now here he's in Rome, Oregon, of all places. Doesn't know what that is. Trucks driving by. What is a truck, and other things. So anyway, that's the first part is humorous that way and gets you going. And so anyway,
was in there. And I also want to commend you on the visual. Like, you guys had some amazing shots. You guys must have had drones up to the skies to pull off some of those shots that you were creating.
Yeah, for people who want, this is a shameless plug, we want the video, you get all the behind the scenes stuff about, there's a drone shot that's the end shot in Rome, but that's not in the movie. Amazingly, our first shot with the drone in the whole film, it got stuck up in about a 150-foot tree, and our cinematographer risked his life to go up there and get it. It's his drone. So that's one of the backs you'll never know by watching the movie. But yeah, people have loved the drone shots, the music with Matt Carney, um,
Yeah.
some of the other Jason. Um, I'm on the spot now. Obviously, I'm forgetting his name. How can I possibly? But anyway, other Christian artists, and so anyway, it was fun to put together. The
Yeah.
lead act, the whole experience, the 2.5 months was magical for him.
Yeah, it's an
So
incredible story. Tell people how they can watch the film today if they're interested.
you simply go to translatedfilm.com. Just you can Google it or put it in your browser, translatedfilm.com, and you can rent it for $2.99 or buy it for $9.99. Includes shipping, and no, it does not include shipping. But you can rent it for $2.99. Translatedfilm.com. There's a trailer there that you can see. You can see some of the reviews. Um, Men and women love it, and I mean it's really satisfying though to like fed my spirit to the max, made me laugh and cry, and or a much needed message for the church, the body of
Yeah.
Christ. All these kind of messages are because when you start writing this and risk everything, putting this together, you don't know what people are going to think of it.
Sure.
And the response by the audience was just, at the theater was fantastic. And for me, like I said, we started the show, never thought I'd ever go to a church in my life, let alone be a Christian. And then to be making Christian films and then sitting there the last night of the showing on the huge screen, where I'd watch other movies, multi-million-dollar movies, and seeing, just kind of pinch myself, this really happened.
Yeah. Translatedfilm.com is the website to view translated movie. $2.99 to rent, $9.99 to purchase. I would encourage anybody watching this now or on the rebroadcast to head over to that website and do so. You had just mentioned you never thought you would do this, Jerry, that you never thought you'd make Christian films. You never thought you'd sit in a church and these different things. How would you encourage someone who has a vision of being either in media in some way, but has maybe the same thoughts as you had growing up, that maybe didn't know that you were going to go to church, you weren't sure if God was real, or just as a matter of fact, be able to walk in the plans that God has for you?
Okay, so about it's if you have a message that you want to tell that you think is unique, that there's a need for people to hear. Um, I hope that answered your question. That is, you got to get training. You have to get training. If film, I like film because normally, well, when theaters are open, they're not now. You can concentrate. There's no distractions. TV, is a little harder because there are distractions. But if you have a message at CBN was just what is the need? What is the message that they think there needs to be a need for? And we did the evolution creation. That was a big controversial subject back in 1981. And there was a need to clarify some things, I thought. God on Trial was to portray why, the God is God of love, and then the unity message and others here and translated. Um, but it's fun to do. It's fun to write these make believe characters for the most part, and then see them. Then you cast them and see which people are going to play those characters. And usually the actors and actresses do a lot better, more with it than what I even wrote. So that's fun
Yeah.
too. So there's some fun in there. I don't know if that's what the answer you're looking for,
Yeah.
but it
Well, I
can be
think
fun. It can be
any
fun making these.
yeah,
Excuse me.
anytime you're following what God has for you, it often encourages you to walk in a little bit of faith. Have you experienced that for yourself?
Yes, on God on Trial. Let me just tell you another testimony because there's so many testimonies in my life I couldn't get to. But I had written the script, had a friend from church who was in business looking for the funding, and I'd given up. And I said, "Well, I just got to get a real job and a real career." So I was starting to taking accounting classes, and then the guy, after about 6, 7 months, nothing happened. He calls me and said, "We got the funding for the movie." I what? And then so I have a twin brother. I called him up and I said, "We got the funding," and he said, "Great, I can stop fasting." I had no idea he was fasting and praying for me. And so, it's a collaborative effort. It's not Jerry Thompson that does all this. It's all the people praying, all the people involved, everybody. It's a team effort. And
Yeah.
but that was a amazing testimony that he had been fasting and he got it right the day or after he started fasting. We hadn't got the money for 6 or 7 months, no interest at all. I mean, really, that we'd heard of.
Yeah.
A lot of
Pat,
testimonies like that I could share for a long time.
sure. I'm sure you have lots of them, and I know that you had mentioned to Kevin before we went live that you're traveling to maybe produce something else.
Yeah, Native American story, true story called Bright Eyes. I'm here in Omaha, Nebraska. I barely got here before getting on the air with you, and she it's just an incredible story. We have some Native American actors and actresses committed. We want to make it big enough to get A-list actors, but you have to get the funding before you can even talk to their agents. But it's a civil rights story. It's she helped Indians first, and they call themselves Indians too, become a landmark court case. Indians were declared people for the first time with civil rights. Native Americans, a lot due to Bright Eyes. It's a court case with Chief Standing Bear versus General George Crook. And then she was even at Wounded Knee in 1890 when that happened. She's the first woman ever allowed to speak, not just Native American, first woman ever allowed to speak at Faneuil Hall in Boston, which was called the Cradle of Liberty. Samuel Adams, our founding fathers, all of that. So she's quite a young Indian girl who became famous for a while. And it's just a great story if you like a Native American stuff. She was a Christian too. Became a Christian. That's not the focus, but you'll see some of that in the movie. But we need to get the funding. So I'm here in Omaha going to be shooting a Kickstarter video. People know what that's a crowdfunding technique or vehicle. And then hopefully people can then pledge their $20 or $40 or $50.
Yeah.
And they get something for that. So
Yeah.
big endeavor. We ask for your
Uh,
prayers because it's supposed to be raining all week and we need some good weather.
Oh, amen. Prayers for clear weather there in Nebraska. We're
Thursday,
familiar with
especially.
we're
Let's
familiar
be
with the
specific.
crowdfunding. We saw The Chosen raise
Yes.
$15 million, and so we know that it's possible. The money God has it out there for you trying to share a message.
Yeah, our goal is close to that. But it's a lot of Native American groups are excited about it, and it's I call it a combination or Dances with Wolves and Amistad. If you ever saw Amistad, where the
Oh, okay, yeah.
African Americans
How do people keep up
were,
with this?
yeah, we'll let you know what's going on.
All right. Well, we'll keep us posted. Pathway.media is the website to hear about some of the films Jerry has mentioned tonight, and of course, translatedfilm.com is the way to go get the movie that we've been talking about tonight. This wonderful film he created a couple years ago. It's an emotional ride. It's got ups and downs. It's also got some humor. It's got some poignant messages for right now. It makes you think. There's a lot going on in this film. I'd encourage anybody to go see it. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Appreciate your time and your testimonies. Hope to stay connected, and whenever we hear about the next project, we'll be sure to let people know.
Okay, got a deal.
All right. Bye now. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for today's episode of Tell Me Your Story. We want to thank you for joining us on the program today. If you have a story that you would like to share with us, you have a testimony to tell, something has God done in your life, I encourage you to email us info@testimonyhouse.org. Until then, guys, we pray you discover a future and a hope for your life today.